classroom buzzed with noise and laughter as students moved around, chatting loudly with one another. In the corner, a boy sat quietly, his notebook open but untouched. His hands rested on his lap, and his eyes followed the sunlight filtering in through the windows. Music had always been his world, a place where he felt safe and understood, but sharing it with others was something that made his heart pound with anxiety. He glanced at the piano in the front of the room. Its black and white keys gleamed under the classroom lights, almost as if they were calling to him. He loved the piano more than anything. It was his companion through lonely afternoons and stormy nights, a place where his thoughts could flow freely without interruption. Yet, the idea of playing it in front of everyone made his stomach twist into knots. He wasn't sure he was ready for that kind of attention, and he worried about what the others might say. Across the room, a few students leaned back in their chairs, smirking as they noticed him staring at the piano. They whispered to each other, nudging one another and glancing in his direction. Their voices were soft enough to seem casual, but their words carried a sharp edge, teasing, joking, and making fun of the boy's quiet demeanor. He felt the sting of their laughter even before it reached him, a cold reminder that he didn't quite fit in with the others. The teacher clapped her hands softly to get everyone's attention. "All right, everyone," she said, smiling gently. "Today we have a special activity. We're going to listen to some music, and I want each of you to try performing if you feel ready. Let's start with you." She pointed toward the piano, and all eyes turned toward the boy. He froze for a moment. His heart raced as his palms became sweaty. He wanted to say no, to sink lower into his chair and disappear. But there was also a tiny spark inside him, a quiet voice that whispered, "You can do this. You love this. It's your chance." He took a deep breath and nodded, though it felt more like a small victory just to agree to stand up. The whispers from his classmates grew louder as he slowly approached the piano. Some shook their heads, muttering under their breath that he would never get it right. Others laughed outright, exchanging jokes about how he always looked so serious and how he was probably going to mess up. It felt like a storm closing in on him, but he kept moving forward, his fingers brushing against the piano's polished surface as he sat down. He stared at the keys for a moment, the pattern of black and white seeming both familiar and intimidating. He thought about the countless hours he had spent practicing alone in his room, the way his fingers had memorized each note until it felt like second nature. But now, with the classroom watching him, every mistake seemed like it would be magnified. Every slip turned into laughter. The fear pressed on him, heavy and unyielding. He placed his hands on the keys, feeling the cool surface beneath his fingers. The room was unusually quiet, except for the occasional giggle or whisper from the back. He closed his eyes for a moment and tried to focus on the music he loved so much, imagining the melodies he had created in his mind over and over. He remembered the first time he had touched a piano, how it had felt magical, and how every note had filled him with joy and curiosity. Some students rolled their eyes, impatient and eager to see him fail. One boy leaned over to a friend and whispered loudly enough to be heard, "Watch this. He's going to make a fool of himself." Others laughed quietly, already anticipating the embarrassment they expected to unfold. It was crushing, but he tried to block it out, telling himself that the music was more important than their opinions. His fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. He could hear his own heartbeat in the silence, a rapid rhythm that seemed to echo through the room. Then, almost instinctively, he pressed a key, and a soft, tentative note filled the space. The sound was delicate, fragile, yet it carried with it a sense of honesty and vulnerability. He took another breath and pressed the next note, and then another, slowly building a melody that was entirely his own. The laughter in the room did not stop immediately. Some students still whispered, trying to disguise their surprise at the sound. Others looked around, uncertain if they were hearing correctly. But gradually, the boy's confidence began to grow. Each note was a small triumph, each chord a quiet declaration that he belonged in this moment. He could feel the fear receding, replaced by the joy that only music could bring. He remembered the words his parents had told him countless times, encouraging him to follow his passion despite the judgment of others. Music was his gift, they had said, and it was meant to be shared, not hidden. Those words now felt real and urgent, giving him the courage to continue even as a few classmates still exchanged doubtful glances. As the melody flowed, the classroom began to change. The whispers of mockery faded, replaced by a growing sense of curiosity. Students leaned forward slightly, drawn in by the unexpected beauty of the performance. Some faces softened, eyes widening as they realized that what they had anticipated as failure was actually something remarkable. The boy felt a strange mix of relief and exhilaration. He wasn't just playing notes anymore. He was telling a story, expressing emotions he had kept bottled up for too long. Each chord was a part of him, each phrase a reflection of his determination and love for music. The piano no longer felt intimidating. It was an extension of himself, a bridge between his inner world and the audience in front of him. By the time he reached the middle of his piece, the classroom had grown still. The energy in the room shifted from mocking to attentive, as everyone began to appreciate the effort, skill, and emotion pouring from the piano. The boy noticed the change but remained focused, letting the music guide him rather than the reactions of those around him. For the first time, he felt truly seen. Not for his quietness, not for the teasing, but for his talent and courage. The fear that had gripped him seemed distant now, replaced by a calm determination. He was no longer just a student facing ridicule. He was a musician sharing a piece of himself, and nothing else mattered. When the final note lingered in the air, the boy took a deep breath, lowering his hands slowly. He opened his eyes and saw the classroom looking back at him, a mix of astonishment and newfound respect in their faces. Even those who had laughed at him earlier seemed caught off guard, unsure how to react. The teacher's expression was one of pride, a silent acknowledgement of the bravery and skill that had just been displayed. For the boy, the moment was transformative. He realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. He had faced ridicule, anxiety, and doubt, yet he had done what he loved and had done it well. The experience, though terrifying at first, had proven to him that his passion was stronger than the mockery of others. As he stood up from the piano, a small smile crossed his face. It was not a smile of arrogance or triumph over others, but one of quiet satisfaction. He had honored his own love for music, and that was enough. Around him, the room seemed to breathe differently, the energy lighter and more attentive, as though the music had left a lasting impression on everyone present. He returned to his seat, heart still racing but full of pride. The whispers of mockery had disappeared, replaced by murmurs of admiration and curiosity. He knew this was only the beginning, that there would be more challenges ahead, more moments where he would have to face fear and judgment. But for the first time, he felt ready, confident that his music and his voice mattered, no matter what others said. As the class continued, the boy's mind replayed the melody he had just played, each note a reminder of the courage he had shown. He realized that the piano was not just an instrument. It was a mirror of his spirit, a way to express the parts of himself that words could never capture. The ridicule he had feared had lost its power, replaced by the recognition that true strength came from following one's passion and believing in oneself. By the end of the day, the boy left the classroom with a new sense of purpose. He had faced his fears, shared his talent, and discovered that his music could touch others in ways he had never imagined. And though the journey ahead was still uncertain, he knew that with each note he played, he was growing stronger, braver, and more alive than ever before. The boy returned to his seat, feeling a mix of relief and lingering tension. He had survived the first moment of fear, but he knew that not everyone in the classroom had changed their opinion of him. A few students still whispered quietly, casting occasional glances his way, testing if he could maintain the courage he had just shown. He tried to ignore them, focusing instead on the soft echo of the notes that still rang in his mind. The teacher smiled encouragingly, sensing the boy's nervous energy. "That was a beautiful start," she said. "Would you like to try another piece later? Or would someone else like to perform now?" Her voice was calm, warm, and supportive, a contrast to the teasing murmurs around the room. The boy hesitated, unsure if he was ready to face the piano again so soon. But a spark inside him urged him forward. He wanted to prove not just to others but to himself that he could do it. A few students were chosen to play next, but the boy's mind was elsewhere. He watched their performances with a new perspective, noticing the way music could draw people together. Some played confidently, some nervously, but all of them carried their own stories in the melodies. He began to understand that music was a language everyone could speak, yet each person's voice was unique. This thought gave him a quiet sense of pride, reminding him why he loved the piano so deeply. When his turn came again, a few students chuckled quietly, exchanging looks that seemed to say, "Let's see if he can keep it up." The boy's stomach tightened, but he held his head high. He walked to the piano slowly, his steps measured, determined not to rush. Sitting down, he took a moment to feel the smooth keys beneath his fingers, grounding himself in something familiar and comforting. The laughter and whispers were still there, a low hum of doubt, but it no longer held the same power over him. He began with a gentle note, letting it resonate through the classroom. The sound was soft but steady, carrying with it a sense of calm confidence. Slowly, he added more notes, each one deliberate and careful, forming a melody that was both simple and touching. The whispers began to fade as the students realized that he was serious, that he wasn't just attempting to play, he was creating something meaningful. One boy in the back shook his head in disbelief, unable to hide his surprise. He had expected the performance to falter, to collapse under the pressure of ridicule. Instead, he found himself leaning forward, captivated by the unexpected skill and emotion. A few girls exchanged quiet whispers, commenting on how beautiful the music sounded and how much focus it required. The atmosphere in the classroom was shifting, from mockery to attention, from doubt to curiosity. The boy's mind, once clouded with anxiety, began to clear. He remembered the hours spent alone at the piano, the countless nights practicing when no one was watching. Each practice session had built not just skill, but resilience, patience, and dedication. Now, those quiet efforts were unfolding in real time, revealing a part of him that few had seen before. The music carried his determination, his hope, and his quiet strength. As he played, he noticed small details around him he hadn't before. The way the sunlight hit the keys, creating soft shadows. The expressions of classmates who had previously mocked him, now slowly transforming into admiration. Even the teacher's eyes seemed to shine with pride. Each detail reinforced his connection to the moment, making the music feel alive, almost as if it were a living conversation between him and the room. He pushed himself further, adding complexity to the piece. The melody became richer, moving from gentle and hesitant to bold and expressive. Every note was intentional, a reflection of the emotion he felt but often struggled to express in words. Some students sat up straighter, others leaned on their desks, drawn in by the story unfolding through the music. Even those who had whispered cruelly before seemed unable to look away. A quiet tension filled the air as he approached the climax of the piece. The notes built upon each other, layering emotion, energy, and rhythm. The boy felt his heartbeat sync with the music, a steady drum beneath the flowing melody. He realized that the piano was no longer an object of fear, but a partner, guiding him and allowing him to share a part of himself that words could never capture. In that moment, the room became a stage, and he the storyteller, speaking not with voice, but with sound. Some of the students who had mocked him began to shift in their seats, their expressions softening. They whispered to each other, almost in awe, acknowledging that they had underestimated him. The boy, focused on the piano, did not notice their surprise, but he could sense a change in energy, a shift from ridicule to respect. The room was no longer a hostile environment. It was listening, absorbing the emotions he poured into every note. As he reached the final section, he felt a surge of exhilaration. The music flowed effortlessly, each chord a statement of confidence and resilience. He knew that this was the moment that defined not just the performance, but a part of himself he had kept hidden for too long. Every note was a declaration. He was capable, talented, and worthy of recognition, despite the doubts of others. When the last note faded, silence filled the classroom. It was not the awkward silence of expectation or judgment, but a thoughtful, reflective pause. Students exchanged glances, realizing the depth of the performance they had just witnessed. Some who had laughed before now looked embarrassed, unsure of how to respond. The teacher clapped softly, smiling broadly, a subtle but powerful acknowledgement of the courage and skill displayed. The boy slowly rose from the piano, his hands still tingling from the keys. He felt a mixture of relief, pride, and newfound confidence. The whispers of ridicule had diminished significantly, replaced by murmurs of admiration and curiosity. The performance had shifted the perception of him in the classroom, revealing a side of his personality and talent that few had appreciated before. As he returned to his seat, he noticed a few students approaching him quietly. One whispered, "That was amazing. I didn't know you could play like that." Another nodded, looking slightly embarrassed for having laughed earlier. These small acknowledgments, simple as they were, meant more to him than any loud applause could. They reflected a change in understanding, a recognition that talent and courage were more powerful than mockery. The rest of the class continued, but the atmosphere remained different. There was a sense of respect now, a quiet acknowledgement that the boy had faced fear and ridicule and had turned it into something beautiful. Even the students who had initially been skeptical seemed more thoughtful, perhaps realizing the importance of supporting one another rather than mocking. Throughout the day, the boy reflected on the experience. He had faced a challenge, endured teasing, and yet had emerged stronger. He understood that fear and ridicule were part of life, but so was the opportunity to rise above them. Music had given him a way to express himself, to communicate emotions that words could not capture, and to claim a space in a world that sometimes felt hostile. By the time the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, he felt a sense of accomplishment unlike any he had felt before. The piano, once a source of anxiety, had become a symbol of his strength and passion. He had learned that courage was not about never being afraid, but about taking action despite fear. That lesson, more than any note played, would stay with him forever. As he walked out of the classroom, the sunlight warming his face, he felt a quiet determination. This was only the beginning of his journey. There would be more performances, more challenges, and inevitably, more moments where he would have to face judgment. But now he knew that with passion, dedication, and courage, he could overcome fear and even transform ridicule into respect. The music in his heart would guide him, note by note, toward a future filled with possibility and hope. The next day, the boy returned to the classroom with a mixture of anticipation and quiet anxiety. Although he had gained some confidence from his last performance, he knew that the memory of being mocked still lingered in the minds of some students. He carried a small notebook with him, filled with music sheets and practice notes, a reminder of the hours he had spent refining his skills alone. Each step toward the piano felt heavier than the last, as though he carried both his courage and the expectations of the room on his shoulders. The teacher greeted him with a nod and a warm smile. "I'm looking forward to your next piece," she said, gently encouraging him. The boy nodded, feeling a flicker of reassurance. Sitting at the piano, he let his hands hover over the keys, remembering the feeling of music flowing through him. The classroom buzzed faintly, with students chatting quietly among themselves. Some had already shifted their attitude, their curiosity replacing earlier ridicule, while others still exchanged skeptical glances. He took a deep breath and pressed the first note. It was soft, deliberate, and full of intention. He remembered the advice his parents had given him. Play from your heart, not from fear. That idea resonated deeply as he let the melody grow slowly, carefully, from the first simple chord. His fingers moved with a mixture of precision and emotion, each note telling a part of his story. For a moment, he felt as if the classroom had disappeared, leaving only him and the music. A few students in the back whispered, trying to gauge whether this performance would falter like the skeptics predicted. But as the boy's hands moved more confidently over the keys, the whispers died down. The melody he played was richer, more complex than the previous day, weaving in subtle shifts of rhythm and emotion. The music carried a depth that spoke of determination, practice, and the courage to keep moving forward despite fear. The boy felt the tension in his body ease slightly. Each note was a small triumph, a reminder that the effort he had put in alone could create something beautiful in the presence of others. He was aware of the eyes on him, the mixture of admiration and lingering doubt, but he focused on the music, letting it guide his thoughts and emotions. This was not just a performance. It was an expression of himself, of everything he had endured to reach this moment. A girl in the middle of the room leaned forward, watching his hands move gracefully over the keys. Her eyes widened with surprise as she whispered to a friend, "He's really good. I didn't think he could do that." The boy, though focused on his playing, felt a small surge of encouragement from the subtle shift in energy around him. The realization that his music could touch others began to sink in, filling him with quiet pride. He pushed himself further, adding layers of harmony and subtle variations that brought the piece to life. The classroom, once filled with whispers and laughter, was now silent, captivated by the sound. Even those students who had mocked him previously sat up straighter, their expressions shifting from amusement to amazement. The boy's music seemed to fill the space, creating a bridge between his inner world and the audience before him. As he played, he noticed the subtle changes in his classmates' expressions. Some were nodding along, completely absorbed in the melody. Others looked slightly embarrassed, realizing that their earlier judgment had been premature. The boy felt a mix of relief and satisfaction, not from proving anyone wrong, but from sharing a part of himself that had long been hidden. The music was a language of truth, and in this moment it was being heard and understood. He began the climax of the piece, his fingers flying over the keys with energy and precision. The notes rose and fell, carrying emotion that words could never convey. The boy's heart raced with excitement, his previous anxiety replaced by a sense of connection and flow. The classroom seemed to hold its breath, every student leaning in to catch the nuances of the melody. The music was no longer just sound. It was a story, a journey, and everyone could feel it. A boy in the front row, who had been one of the loudest critics, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He whispered to a friend, "I didn't expect this. He's amazing." The comment, though quiet, reflected the gradual transformation taking place in the room. The power of the boy's performance was undeniable, touching hearts and changing perceptions with each note. The boy approached the final section of the piece, slowing slightly, letting the notes linger with intention and care. He played each chord with feeling, allowing the emotion to flow naturally, unrestrained by fear or doubt. The classroom remained still, captivated by the authenticity and beauty of the music. The silence was profound, a shared moment of appreciation and respect that transcended words. When the last note faded into the quiet air, the boy let his hands rest on the keys, breathing heavily but feeling exhilarated. He opened his eyes to see the classroom in a state of awe. Faces that had once shown doubt and mockery now reflected surprise, admiration, and a quiet acknowledgement of the courage he had shown. The teacher's expression was one of deep pride, and the boy felt a warm sense of accomplishment that filled him from head to toe. Some students clapped softly at first, then the applause grew, a ripple of genuine appreciation for the performance they had just witnessed. The boy smiled quietly, not for attention, but because he had shared a piece of himself, and it had been received with respect. The energy in the room had shifted, the previous ridicule replaced by recognition and a newfound sense of connection. After sitting back down, the boy reflected on the experience. He had faced fear, stood before judgment, and still managed to express himself fully. The music had allowed him to communicate his feelings, his dedication, and his courage, and in return, he had received acknowledgement and understanding. This moment reinforced his belief that passion and perseverance could overcome doubt and mockery. As the day continued, the boy noticed the change in his classmates' behavior. Conversations now included quiet compliments and genuine curiosity about his music. Some who had mocked him approached hesitantly, asking questions or showing interest in his practice. The boy responded with patience and quiet confidence, understanding that respect and understanding often grew slowly, and that small gestures could have a lasting impact. Throughout the afternoon, he replayed the melody in his mind, feeling the emotions it had stirred in both himself and the classroom. Each note reminded him of the hours of practice, the moments of doubt, and the courage it took to play despite fear. He realized that music was not just an outlet, but a bridge, a way to connect, communicate, and even heal. The boy felt a renewed determination to continue, to explore the depths of his talent and share it with others. By the end of the day, he walked home with a sense of quiet pride. The world outside the classroom seemed brighter, filled with possibilities he had never fully considered. The performance had been more than just an exercise in courage. It had been a revelation, showing him the power of persistence, passion, and the willingness to face fear head-on. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, but he felt prepared, strengthened by the knowledge that he could rise above ridicule and transform it into something meaningful. As he sat at his piano later that evening, practicing the piece once more, the boy felt a sense of calm focus. The notes came naturally, flowing with confidence and ease. The memory of the classroom and the reactions of his peers fueled his dedication, reminding him of the impact music could have. He knew that each practice session, each performance, was a step toward something greater, a journey of growth, courage, and expression that was uniquely his own. That night, as he closed his music notebook and turned off the lamp, he felt a quiet satisfaction. He had faced fear, endured scrutiny, and still found his voice through the piano. The day's events had shown him the power of perseverance, the importance of following one's passion, and the transformative nature of authentic expression. The boy understood that true courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it, and he felt ready to continue, one note at a time. The boy walked into the classroom that morning with a quiet resolve. He knew that today, more than ever, he wanted to prove something to himself. The piano in the front corner seemed to gleam brighter than usual under the lights, almost as if it was inviting him again. He carried a notebook of music sheets and a small recording device, a tool he had begun using to track his progress over the last few weeks. Sitting at his desk, he could hear whispers from some classmates who still had their doubts. A few sneered quietly, exchanging glances and smirks, as though today's performance was bound to fail. He ignored them, focusing instead on the familiar comfort of the piano. The teacher noticed his steady demeanor and gave a small nod of encouragement. "Whenever you're ready," she said. The boy nodded back, feeling the calm determination settle within him. He approached the piano slowly, taking a deep breath, and let his hands rest on the smooth black and white keys. The first touch felt grounding, the familiar weight and texture of the keys reminding him that he had practiced, prepared, and could perform. The classroom chatter began to fade in the background as he centered himself. The first notes he played were soft, deliberate, almost tentative, but they carried a subtle strength that immediately drew the attention of those around him. Students who had whispered or laughed moments earlier turned their heads, curious, their expressions changing as the music filled the air. It was different this time, bolder, more confident, more expressive. The boy had learned from past experiences that music was more than notes. It was emotion, energy, and connection. Each sound that left the piano now held a piece of his courage, a reflection of his determination to overcome fear. As the melody developed, the boy's fingers moved gracefully, guided by intuition and practice. The music grew in richness, forming harmonies that filled the entire classroom. The students' laughter faded completely, replaced by a quiet fascination. Even those who had mocked him before leaned forward in their chairs, listening intently. A few exchanged whispers of disbelief, saying things like, "I didn't know he could play like that," and "This is really good." Their surprise was evident, their skepticism slowly replaced by admiration. The boy felt the energy in the room shift, a tangible change that made him even more determined. He played with emotion, each chord carefully chosen, each note an expression of his inner thoughts. The classroom, once a space of mockery and doubt, now seemed to breathe with him, absorbed in the music. He was no longer just a student sitting at a piano. He was a storyteller, weaving a narrative that resonated with everyone present. His fear had transformed into focus, his hesitation into purpose. A girl in the back row, who had often teased him before, sat wide-eyed, clearly impressed. Her whisper to a friend was barely audible, but it carried genuine surprise. "It's beautiful. I didn't expect this." The boy, focused on his performance, did not notice her words directly, but he could sense the attention, the quiet shift from ridicule to respect. The music had a power beyond his own control, touching hearts, commanding attention, and transforming the atmosphere. The melody built steadily, flowing from gentle passages into more complex sequences. The boy's fingers flew over the keys with precision and grace, but never at the cost of emotion. Each note told a story, a reflection of his journey from fear to courage. He remembered the long nights of practice, the moments of self-doubt, and the teasing that had once made him want to hide. Now, every hardship felt worth it as he played, as if the music itself was a testament to his persistence and resilience. Some of the students who had mocked him earlier now sat in awe, their previous amusement replaced by genuine astonishment. Their whispers became quiet gasps, and a few shifted in their seats uncomfortably, realizing that they had underestimated him. The boy noticed this change but remained immersed in his music, understanding that the performance was about him expressing himself, not seeking validation. Yet, the acknowledgement from the room added an unspoken encouragement, a subtle affirmation that he was on the right path. As he approached the climax of the piece, the music grew in intensity and complexity. His fingers moved with confidence and speed, each note precise and full of life. The classroom had fallen into a deep, attentive silence, the kind that comes when people are fully engaged and captivated. Every student, even those who had mocked him previously, seemed drawn into the melody, their eyes fixed on the piano and the boy who now commanded it. The silence was profound, filled with a sense of awe and respect that the boy could feel vibrating in the room. The boy continued to play, building layers of harmony and emotion that told a story of struggle, courage, and triumph. The sound of the piano seemed to fill the space entirely, leaving no room for whispers, laughter, or doubt. He was fully present in the moment, each chord a reflection of his inner strength, each melody a declaration of his determination to rise above ridicule. The music became more than performance. It became a bridge connecting his heart to the hearts of his classmates. In the back of the room, a student who had been particularly vocal in his ridicule now sat motionless, eyes wide with amazement. The boy's music had silenced even the harshest critics, leaving them with nothing but a deep sense of wonder. The energy in the classroom was almost tangible, a shared experience of awe, as everyone listened, captivated by the authenticity and beauty of the performance. The boy felt the presence of the audience, but it no longer intimidated him. It inspired him to give his best. The final passage approached, slow and deliberate, with the boy letting the notes linger and resonate. Each chord was infused with emotion, every pause purposeful. The classroom remained utterly silent, hanging on every sound. The boy felt a sense of fulfillment and calm, knowing he had shared something meaningful and authentic. The silence itself became a part of the performance, a reflection of the impact the music had on the listeners. When the last note faded into the air, it seemed as if time had paused. The room remained still for a moment, the weight of the performance lingering. Then, slowly, the silence was broken by a soft gasp from a student, followed by quiet murmurs of admiration. The boy lowered his hands from the keys, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced fear, endured ridicule, and emerged not only unscathed but triumphant, leaving an unforgettable impression on the entire classroom. The teacher's expression was one of quiet pride, eyes glistening slightly with appreciation for the courage and talent on display. She nodded toward the boy, acknowledging the journey he had taken and the moment of transformation he had created. Some students began to clap softly. Then the applause grew steadily, sincere and heartfelt. The boy smiled faintly, not seeking attention, but understanding that his performance had shifted perceptions, inspired reflection, and earned respect. As the applause continued, the boy realized that this moment was more than just a performance. It was a turning point, a confirmation that his passion, courage, and perseverance could transcend fear and ridicule. He felt a quiet confidence settle within him, knowing that the music he loved could not only express his own emotions, but also touch the hearts of others. The classroom, once a place of mockery, had become a space of recognition, respect, and shared appreciation for something genuine and beautiful. Later, as the students returned to their seats and the day moved on, the boy reflected on what had just happened. He understood that fear and doubt would always be present, but courage and dedication could overcome them. The music had spoken louder than words, silencing mockery and creating a shared experience that would remain with everyone in the room. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that he had stayed true to himself and allowed his passion to shine, no matter the judgment of others. The rest of the day passed with a sense of quiet reflection. Some students approached him, offering congratulations or asking about his practice. Others simply listened from a distance, carrying the memory of the performance in their minds. The boy returned to his own world of music, feeling empowered and inspired. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, more moments where he would have to face fear or judgment. But he felt ready, strengthened by the knowledge that he could turn even ridicule into respect through dedication and authentic expression. As he left the classroom that evening, the boy walked with a light step. The memory of the silence, the impact of his music, and the transformation of the classroom filled him with a quiet joy. He understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. And he knew, deep in his heart, that the piano would always be his voice, a means to share his truth, inspire others, and continue growing, note by note, day by day. The boy sat quietly after his performance, letting the applause wash over him. It was not just the sound of clapping. It was a recognition of his courage, his effort, and the hours he had dedicated to the piano. He felt a mixture of pride and humility, knowing that the moment he had feared for so long had transformed into something beautiful and unforgettable. The students around him seemed changed as well, their expressions a mix of respect, surprise, and admiration. A few of the students who had mocked him before approached hesitantly. Their faces showed a blend of embarrassment and curiosity. One of them spoke first, a quiet voice tinged with sincerity. I didn't realize you could play like that. It was really amazing." The boy nodded politely, a small smile forming on his lips. He didn't hold anger or resentment. He understood that people often judged without knowing, and now they had seen the truth. The teacher stepped forward, her eyes shining with pride. "You have shown us all the power of perseverance and courage," she said. "It is not just about talent, but about heart, dedication, and the willingness to face fear. Today, you have inspired everyone in this room." The boy felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet confirmation that he had faced his fear and had been true to himself. Some students whispered to each other, commenting on how beautiful the music was and how brave it was for him to perform despite being teased before. Their opinions had shifted completely, and the energy in the classroom was one of respect and appreciation. The boy realized that sometimes people need to witness courage to understand it, and that his music had become a silent teacher, showing everyone the value of persistence and authenticity. As the class continued, the boy felt a sense of calm pride. He understood that the journey was not just about playing music perfectly, but about the experience, the emotions, and the connection he created with others. Each note he played had been an extension of himself, and now he could see the impact it had made. Even those who had been critical before seemed to have a newfound understanding, and that realization gave him quiet satisfaction. Later, during a break, some students approached him with questions about his practice and how he had learned to play so well. He explained simply, without boastfulness, that it had taken patience, consistent practice, and belief in himself. He wanted them to know that talent alone was not enough. Dedication and courage were just as important. The students listened intently, absorbing every word, and he felt a sense of fulfillment in sharing not just music, but knowledge and inspiration. The boy reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The teasing, the ridicule, and the self-doubt had all been part of a process that strengthened his resolve. Each challenge he faced had been an opportunity to grow, and each moment of fear had been a chance to rise above it. The piano had been his companion, guiding him through every step, offering a way to express what words could not. He thought about the moments of silence that had filled the room during his performance. Those moments were powerful, more impactful than any applause or compliment. They reflected understanding, appreciation, and a deep connection between the music and the listeners. The boy realized that silence could be as meaningful as sound, that attention and respect could speak volumes without words. It was a lesson he would carry with him forever. As the day came to a close, the boy gathered his belongings and prepared to leave the classroom. The students around him seemed more thoughtful, reflective, and considerate. Some offered small smiles of acknowledgement, while others quietly complimented his music. The boy walked with a sense of quiet confidence, knowing that he had not only faced his fears, but had also inspired change in the hearts of others. On his way home, he thought about the future and the challenges that might lie ahead. He understood that fear and judgment would always exist, but he had learned that courage, persistence, and self-belief could overcome them. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a source of strength, a way to express himself, and a means to connect with others. Every note he played carried a piece of his heart and soul, and he knew that this journey was only beginning. When he arrived home, he sat at the piano once more. The familiar keys welcomed him, and he played quietly, allowing the melodies to flow naturally. The music carried the emotions of the day, the fear, the determination, the triumph, and the joy. Each chord was a reminder of what he had accomplished, and each note reinforced his belief in the power of persistence and courage. His family listened from the next room, impressed and proud. They had watched him grow, practice, and face challenges, but seeing the transformation in his confidence and the beauty of his music was something extraordinary. The boy felt grateful for their support, realizing that encouragement and understanding from loved ones could strengthen resolve and inspire growth. It was a reminder that success was often a shared journey, built with the help of those who care. As the evening turned to night, the boy reflected on everything he had learned. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Talent was important, but dedication, practice, and resilience were equally essential. And most importantly, sharing one's passion and being authentic could inspire, transform, and create connections that words alone could not achieve. The lessons of the day were etched into his heart, guiding him toward a future filled with possibility. Before going to bed, the boy wrote in his notebook, recording his thoughts, feelings, and the lessons he had learned. He noted the moments of fear, the triumphs, and the reactions of those around him. It was a way to capture the journey, a reminder that every step, no matter how small, contributed to growth. Writing it down helped him understand that courage, perseverance, and passion were qualities that could continue to guide him in every aspect of life. The next morning, the boy awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The experience in the classroom had left a lasting impact, not only on him but on the students who had witnessed it. He felt ready to face new challenges, explore new melodies, and continue expressing himself through the piano. The lessons of courage, patience, and resilience would stay with him, shaping the person he was becoming and inspiring him to reach further. Throughout the following weeks, the boy continued to play in class, each time with more confidence and joy. His classmates treated him with newfound respect, some even seeking advice and guidance in learning music themselves. The boy responded kindly, sharing tips and encouraging them to practice and pursue their passions. It was a different kind of fulfillment, knowing that his journey could inspire and support others. The boy realized that ridicule and fear were temporary, but the strength to face them and the courage to pursue one's passion could create lasting impact. Music had been the catalyst, but the true lesson was about perseverance, authenticity, and self-belief. He had learned that sharing one's talents and passions with honesty and dedication could transform not only oneself but also the perceptions of others. Years later, the memory of that day remained vivid. The boy remembered the silence that had filled the classroom, the applause that followed, and the expressions of astonishment and admiration. He remembered the courage it took to face fear, the dedication required to master the piano, and the joy of expressing himself authentically. It was a moment that defined not just a performance, but a turning point in his confidence, self-awareness, and understanding of what it meant to be brave. The boy knew that life would always present challenges, moments of doubt, and times when ridicule or judgment might arise. But he also knew that courage, perseverance, and authenticity could overcome these obstacles. He understood that passion, when nurtured and shared, could inspire others and create lasting connections. And he knew that the piano, with its keys of black and white, would always be a voice for his heart, a guide for his spirit, and a source of strength, hope, and joy. As he looked back on that journey, the boy felt grateful for every note played, every fear faced, and every moment of doubt overcome. The experience had taught him that true growth comes from embracing challenges, following one's passion, and believing in oneself. It had shown him that courage was a quiet, persistent force, and that even the smallest acts of determination could create profound change. And most importantly, it had proven that authenticity, dedication, and heart could turn ridicule into respect, fear into triumph, and silence into a shared moment of awe and inspiration.